Okay, so today's date is the 17th of May, 2021. My name is Harry Warren, and I'm interviewing James Foster of Wessex Working Horses online via Zoom for the socially distanced encounters of the Rural Kind project. To start with, can you tell me your age, occupation, and how long you've been working in this field?
I'm 42. I've been working as a horse logger for about 2 years now. Sorry, what was the other question?
Yeah, that was just occupation, how long you've been working in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll jump in. Have you always been local to the area? And if so, do you feel you explore outside of town into nature?
Well, I moved down to Dorset originally about just over 10 years ago. And I actually moved from London. I've been out there about 10 years. But the last 10 years I've been in Dorset and in the last 3 or 4 years in Wiltshire. So yeah, I've got to know the area quite well. I enjoy living here.
Yeah. You picked up your horticulture education in London, correct?
No. I actually went to college at Pershore in Worcestershire.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah. Back in the day, back in my teens, early 20s, I was a horticulture student, and then when on graduating from there, I moved down to London and was working for a couple of different landscape companies for on and off for about 10 years.
Okay. Are people in your local community involved in any rural traditions, crafts, practice? Basically, is it, do you just know that like around your area there are many crafts going on?
Yeah. I mean, I know people in my village who are involved in rural crafts, and being a member of local organisations, I've got to know people who also practice things like coppicing and hedge laying and spar making, for example, on the other coppice related crafts. Indeed, I've got to know other people in the local area who also do horse logging too.
So what do you know about like the Cranborne Chase area?
Well, loosely the geographical region, I'm aware of it. I personally live in Chilmark, which is sort of the north of the Cranborne Chase area. But to be honest, I don't know a huge amount about the history of it. I know it was an ancient hunting ground for aristocracy in the past, but that's about it, really.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll jump into questions about like your work. I think the most interesting one is your animal companions. So on your website, wessexworkinghorses.com, you list 2 assistants for your work, Flynn and Ozzy. Could you tell us about these 2?
Flynn and Ozzy. Well, I'll talk about Flynn first. Flynn is he's my horse. He's a working shire, and he's just turned 11, and we've owned him for about coming up for 3 years now. His life before we bought him, he was owned by a private individual who would ride and would drive him too. So he's been trained or broken to drive on the road, and that all happened in the Andover area. And so he hasn't moved very far to join our guys. And yeah, so since I've had him for the last 2 or 3 years, I've introduced him to working in the woods, which he's taken to really well.
Yeah. Is that like expected that he takes to it well, or is it like quite a tricky thing?
Yeah, it's quite tricky. Not all horses, will comfortably work in woods, even if they have been used to working in fields or driven on the road or ridden or whatever. But yes, it's an alien environment for them, really. They're used to being, they're out in open fields where they can see any dangers coming towards them. In the woods, it's full of dangers, really, and scary creatures could jump out. And so it takes quite a lot of trust to build up trust between you and your horse, so they feel happy to be working with you in those conditions.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. So what about Ozzy, who is a dog?
Ozzy is a dog. Yeah,
No.
he's our Jack Russell. He occasionally comes out on to jobs with us on local jobs, and generally gets in the way, really. But yeah, we've just put him on the website for a bit of fun, really. But yeah, he's the central part of the team, really.
Okay, so your website describes Flynn as 16.3 HH, which I think might mean hands. I don't know a lot about horses.
It
What
does.
kind of measurement is that?
Yeah, 16 hands. Let's get this right. And you've put me on the spot now. If I was to, I could find out for you. It's quite easy to convert it into imperial measurements. I think it's 4 inches to the hand. I'm not exactly sure. I have to look that up. You put me on the spot there, Harry. But it is it is possible to work out exactly. It's just the way they use. It's the way they measure horses, and you can put it into metrical.
Does that work out as Flynn's being like quite a large horse?
No, not really. Well, large compared to some horses, but in terms of the heavies, or in terms of shires, he's quite a small shire. If you're probably used to seeing shires at shows, perhaps putting a brewery dray or something. Local Gillingham show, sometimes see them there, or Great Dorset Steam Fair or something. So they tend to be quite big, 18, sometimes 19 hands. Big shire. So Flynn is quite a small shire, but that makes him quite useful for working in the woods. Having a very tall horse sometimes isn't a benefit, where you've got to get under trees and under a low canopy, and also on steep ground. It's beneficial to have a horse which is a bit shorter, a lower sense of gravity. They can keep their feet on steep ground, and we often work in those conditions. So having a shorter horse is often an advantage in horse logging.
Okay. You also mentioned that Flynn is able to work in SSSIs. Those are SSSIs. Could you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, triple SIs. So sites of special scientific interest. Generally, the sort of sites we work in are sites which can be sensitive. They've got triple SI status on them if, for example, there are rare types of mosses or lichens, perhaps on the stumps of trees, or rare types of flora or fauna or something, where they don't want machinery to be operating in, which could destroy those rare plants or animals. So yeah, we quite often get involved in working in those sorts of sites. It's just because of the low impact of horse logging. We don't cause as much damage as perhaps the machinery would.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, a benefit of sitting more on a traditional side of horse logging rather than using more modern machinery.
Absolutely, yeah. So protected sites are kind of our, I would say, I wouldn't say our bread and butter sort of work, but we certainly do get involved with those sorts of jobs now and again. And we're the only option. They just cannot use machinery in those sites. If it wasn't for horse loggers still working, those sites wouldn't get managed. They'd just be left.
Yeah. So could you walk us through an average day practicing the craft?
An average day? Quite often we tend to work away from home, so we quite often stay on site. So we tend to do 4 or sometimes 5-day blocks of work. So we tend to travel the day before, so the horse is rested on the first day of the job. So we'll travel the night before, and the horse will be put out to graze on an area of pasture which hopefully the clients provided, or we'll feed them hay overnight. So while on waking the next morning, we obviously feed the horse first. That's the most important thing. Make sure they're fed and watered, and then we obviously have to groom the horse too. And once they're clean and ready they can be harnessed. At that point, we'll head onto the work site. We'll don our PPE and get all our equipment together, and we'll walk in to the woodland site, and we'll start work and make it. We've usually got a plan of action discussed prior to all of that, so we get in and start shifting some timber.
So that's interesting. You mentioned PPE. Is that specific to horse logging, or is that because of the coronavirus pandemic?
No, PPE in forestry. It's important to have all the correct, because we're using chainsaws quite a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. So that will be all the chainsaw equipment. So usually a hard hat and visor. Obviously there could be dead wood in the tree canopy that could come down and hit you. That's a sort of general thing with forestry work. We also have chainsaw trousers and boots. So that's the PPE that we wear, and it's all high vis too, so people can see you. The horse has his harness on, and we've got various chains, and sometimes we use a logging arch too with the horse, which is a piece of kit that's used to extract more timber than we would normally using just a swingle train. Yeah.
Is just I think it's quite an interesting idea for, like, because it's such a rural tradition, or I guess such an ancient tradition. Has the coronavirus pandemic had much of an effect on it, or is it not as felt in your field?
No, I would say we had some contracts which were postponed. Certainly that happened at the beginning of last year, but we had some contracts in South Wales, and we had travel dispensation sorted out by Natural Resource Wales. So we were able to travel into South Wales because at the time they had their specific lockdown going on there. Apart from that little hiccup, generally speaking, we're self-contained. We're in the woods. We're all camping. Then there might be 2 or 3 or 4 of us there camping in our own horse lorries or horse boxes, and we're not really interacting with the general public. We might have a contract managers come and visit, but we all practice COVID, COVID rules, and it hasn't really affected us that much. There's been a bit of delay with some of the contracts, but generally speaking, not too bad.
Okay, so yeah, we've talked about like horse logging, but what other services are you able to provide using working horses?
Well, Wessex Working Horse is my business. It's new. We've been going for about a year or so, but I'm very aware that horse logging does tend to be quite seasonal. We do tend to be busier in the winter and not so busy in the summertime, just by the nature of birds nesting season. So what I'm trying to do is tie in with my other work line, which is landscape gardening, using the horses to create and maintain, manage wildflower meadows. Back in the day, horses were used for haymaking, and all that equipment is still available, whether it's old-fashioned equipment restored, or you can buy brand new equipment to the similar sort of designs as what was used in the past. So it is possible to mow, rake, harrow a wildflower meadow in much the same way hay meadows were managed back years ago.
Just out of curiosity, so like when you talk about the older sort of equipment that you use, that you attach to horses, where do you get those from? Do you also like communicate with other people who practice rural crafts like blacksmiths, or do you have to go to like a more modern convenience for it?
Both, all of that actually. I've had pieces of modern kit which I've had adjusted by my local blacksmith. I've recently purchased an old hay rake, which is a very old piece of equipment that was used, in Edwardian times and before. which is a horse-drawn machine which rakes hay. But also there are companies out there and or suppliers locally that import brand new equipment from North America. In America still use horses, and they're developing new horse-drawn equipment all of the time. Some of it's brand new design, some of it's modifications from old style horse-drawn kit. That they are manufacturing new stuff now, and there's a company in the UK which imports it. So you know, there's big opportunity for horse-drawn equipment, and you know, so it's definitely worth looking into that.
Yeah. So when we talk about the other services you provide, and you talked about getting into horticulture and educating in it earlier, is that like the kind of skills and experience that feed into these other services, or is it something that you're continuously learning?
Yeah. Do you mean did horticulture lead me into this line of work? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in land-based industries, I suppose. Farming, I've always been interested in, horticulture, and forestry as well. And you know, it's definitely taken me on a path from being an 18-year-old when I started my horticultural training. It did open my eyes to other industries out there, and yeah, I guess it has led me on this path to working in the woods, really, with horses. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think you may have answered my next question as well there, but what drew you to the craft, and how were you introduced to it?
Well, I've as I said, working in horticulture, I was made aware of the coppice industry, and that was what originally got me interested in forestry work. It was the thought of coppicing or woodland management, that you could produce a product which would be useful to, say, horticulture or whatever, and also do a better, you know, have it also the fact that you're cutting that timber down out of the woods is also an environmental plus, and all these things tie together, and it just seems, you know, so right, so natural. And I'm thinking how I could combine my horticultural business along, you know, into something working in the woodlands. And an opportunity came along a few years ago where I could, you know, buy my first horse and get training in horse logging. And so, yeah, that's basically what's led me to where I am today.
Yeah. So how did you learn the craft? Like, was it something that you kind of went off and taught yourself, or is it something that requires teaching?
Well, I knew nothing about horse logging until about 7 or 8 years ago. I was doing some hedge laying work for a farmer in Pencilwood, actually, near Wessex, and he was a part-time horse logger. He had a shire at the time, and he brought his shire down to the hedge that I was laying on, coppicing out. We had a few piles of firewood there, some big pits, some big butts of timber that had to be shifted. They were too big for us to move. And he said, "Don't worry, I'll bring my horse down." So he brought it down, and he spent the day pulling some timber out. And I was amazed by the whole process. I just thought it was fantastic. He even let me have a go on the lines, and I was hooked, basically. So I had a couple of other small woodland jobs where Charles came and helped me on, and he let me have a go on working his horse. But that's as far as it went for quite a few years, until a couple of years ago I was lucky enough to be able to buy my own horse and keep it. So that was the start of it. But in the interim time, before I got my first horse, I took some training days with a local chap who sadly passed away now, but he was invaluable. He really he really opened my eyes to the whole industry, and he got me involved in the British Horse Loggers Association, and I got to know various people involved in that organisation, and did a week's residential course in horse logging, um, and that then led on to a mentorship. Basically, I've been appointed a mentor through the British Horse Loggers,
Mm.
and luckily for me, that person's Kate Mobbs Morgan, who's actually the chairman of the British Horse Loggers Association.
Oh.
And we often work together now on jobs. I was doing a job recently in Cirencester with her. So yeah, that's been my path, and I'm just, as I told you, I'm just starting out on my own, but still working with Kate and with other horse loggers locally too, if they need help.
Mm. Yeah. Is that so like the British Horse Loggers Association, is that like quite a large organization?
I wouldn't say it's a large organization. It's certainly the main, it's the main, if not the only organisation in the UK which actively promoting horse logging. They have a reasonably sized membership, I believe, and they have a directory on their website which sort of lists and advertises horse loggers. So if you're a woodland owner and you're wanting to get to know your local, to find a horse logger, you can click on there and see a number of horse loggers which are recommended. So yeah, it's a very useful organisation. They run quite a few events and training seminars and training events throughout the year, and yeah, it's worth getting involved in if you've got an interest in horse logging, or if you want to become a horse logger.
Yeah, just circling back to what you mentioned when you were talking about your first sort of experience with it. I think you said, I'm not completely familiar with the term, it's driving the lines, did you say?
Yeah.
With the horse? Yeah, is that so how, like, when you're using a working horse, is it something you're directly, like, are you directly handling the horse, or is it something that the horse just knows how to do? That's quite interesting.
That's a good question, because some people do let the horse work by itself, but you often see that in North America, sometimes, not quite so much in this country, but in North America you do see horses that just pull the timber with human being involved. Perhaps they're being controlled from voice controls, or they just know the woods so well they know exactly where they're going. Generally speaking, the way I've been taught and the way it's usually done in the UK is that you drive the horse, so you stand behind the horse, two lines which are attached to the horse's bits. Reins are if you're riding. You're effectively long lining the horse. So you're walking behind the horse with two lines, and you're driving the horse along, and the horse is connected to the timber or the harrow, whatever you're doing with the horse, via the harness. And so that's how you're walking along behind the horse.
Is it so, like, when you say, like, you're moving a harrow or timber, is it like a special kind of like wagon, or is it just literally pulling it as it is?
So if you're talking about timber, for example, there's the two main ways we shift the timber is there's a term called tushing, which when you attach a chain to a log, you literally drag it along the ground. The traditional way of doing it, and you generally pull one log, or sometimes you can double chain or double chain two logs together, and you pull one log at a time. It tends to be you tend to try and keep the log as long as possible. You obviously try and make each trip in and out of the woods as efficient as possible, so the horse is a good load every time. But that's called tushing. And when you've got really poor access, it's really narrow, tight. All you've got is the width of a horse to get through. Then that's the method you use. Also, like I said just now, we also use log arches too. They're slightly different. They're pieces of kit which have two shafts which go up each side of the horse and attached to the horse's harness at the midpoint at the D. The arch, basically the arch is designed to actually lift or winch off the front of to lift the front of the log, usually the heavy end, the butt end of the log. We put a chain around it, and we have like a crank system where the heavy end of the log is lifted up, and the arch has two wheels on it, so that the weighty end of the log is actually on the arch, not on the weight's on the arch, not on the horse, and on the wheels. So this obviously reduces quite a lot of friction with the log lifted off the ground, just with the pin end dragging, means that the horse can actually, pull quite a bit more timber in, with the same effort. So we can often carry two larger logs with the arch and tush out perhaps one log in the other system. But you can only use the arch where you've got a bit more width. So on perhaps more open woodlands, or if you're doing some line thinning, first or second thinnings or something, then the arch comes into its own. But if not, then we tush it out. Yeah.
Okay, so like, what do you like enjoy about the craft? And yeah, actually, we'll start. What do you enjoy about the craft?
Well, working with a horse is just you and the horse is fantastic. It really is. I guess for me, it's just seeing horses, really crack on and pull a big log out and really put a huge amount of effort in for you is just such a rewarding feeling. It's quite special, really. I think anyone who has a go, and when they see that horse, really pulling, and they're doing that for you. They're not doing it for them. That you've asked them to do it, and they're doing it. It's such a great feeling. I think that's what does it for me. It's just that relationship you have with the horse. That relationship wasn't there, they wouldn't do it for you. That's what makes it special for me.
Yeah, so I think it goes without saying that, like, when you're working with an animal, it's much more than a bit of machinery or a bit of kit. It's a actual like close relationship.
Absolutely, yeah, really. I think when you look back to the old days when the tractors first came in, a lot of the carters said it just wasn't the same. They really missed that relationship they had with their horse. They'd often start working with them when they were youngsters, and they were working with them until they got to the end of their working life. And so some of them might have had 10 years with one horse or one pair of horses, and they got to know every single bit about their character and habits they picked up along the way, and days where things didn't go well, and then another day where it all went perfectly. All of that is working with horses. It's not plain sailing. Sometimes it does all go a bit wrong, and other days it's just perfection. So I think that's what makes it great. It's not just like sitting on a tractor seat and turning a key and off you go again. It's quite special.
Yeah. So like on the other side of that, are there like parts of it that you don't really enjoy, or like that get a bit complicated sometimes?
Yeah, working in woods in the UK winter, rain and mud is big. Yeah, so you kind of got to get over the whole rain and mud thing. It's you tend to have your hands on dirty logging chains all day long, trying to chain logs. It's it's muddy. It's muddy and wet. So yeah, but being a landscape gardener, I've kind of done a bit of that before, so it's not too much of a. It's not too bad, but some days it does get you, and all your kit is so the horse is fed up. Yeah, some days it does get too much.
Um, yeah. So what aspect of the craft are you most passionate about?
Um, well, like I said, working with the horse is fantastic, and learning those skills and always improving on your horse skills. That's one side of one side of the trade. But also, improving or learning more about how woodlands are managed. That's another passion of mine, and I don't think you can ever stop learning about any of those things. It's in a way that with horticulture, you're always learning new plants and new techniques. But yeah, there's always something to pick up and something to learn, and it's always worth listening to other people who are more experienced, or who've got some great ideas and of different techniques, and yeah, you're always learning.
Yeah. Would you say then, like when it comes to the learning side of it, a lot of it is like being passed down from the more experienced to you, and then I suppose if it's something you're interested in, you'd pass it on to someone else.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm as I said, I'm just at the beginning of my career with the horse as for horse holding. So I've had a huge amount of help from Kate Mobbs Morgan, uh, who has a company called Rowan Working Horses, and she's based in Monmouthshire, but she's my mentor. Yeah, she's passed on a huge amount of knowledge to me, and you know, it's been a fantastic process to pick up all this knowledge, and I've still got a lot to learn. This is still early days in my horse looking career. Every job I do, I tend to learn new techniques or new quicker ways of doing things or whatever. So yeah, it's perhaps one day if I do, if I may be able to pass my knowledge on to somebody else in the future.
Mm. Yeah, so actually, because that's quite an interesting like concept, the like mentorship side of it. Is that something that you'll be doing for a while? Like, is there like when it comes to mentorship, is there a set length on how long it is, or is it like just a general kind of thing?
Well, the program that the BHO have put in is it's quite it really depends on the individuals. I think you're probably best off speaking to Kate, because Kate and the rest of the board at BHO have put this plan together. I'm not privy to all of the information, but I think as long as it works for both her and for me, then we'll carry on working together. But certainly for the last 12 months or so, it's been invaluable for me. I'm very grateful for the BHL and for the help that Kate's given me. But yeah, like I said, in the future, if I'm able to give back some knowledge and to others in the future, then that would definitely be my goal, to pass on any knowledge I can to others.
So do you have like a favorite memory of working with horses? Like I said, like something that sticks out?
Favorite memory? Yeah. Yeah, probably training with my horse Flynn. And when we quite often chain harrow our fields at home, and that's like basically part of my training with him. And the first few times we did it, it didn't always go quite so well. And eventually he accepted me, and there was just a moment when he was working perfectly, and it was just, you could just feel it was just clicking in. I shall never forget that moment. It was quite magical, really. Very difficult to explain, to be honest, but when the horse just starts to trust you, and they'll start, stop, and maneuver on your command, and you're doing it right, and they're listening to you. It's quite special. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that training Flynn for like woodland areas was quite tricky. Is that getting the horse to accept you? Is that also tricky?
Yeah, I think anybody who owns horses will, whether you ride horses or you drive them or whatever you do with them, that whole trust thing can take a long time, and it's not, it just takes time. And some horses it can take longer, and others it's not so bad. But they just basically need to accept you as their leader, really. They're not going to put their trust in someone they haven't got confidence in. So, if they're confident that you're going to keep them out of harm's way, then they'll do anything for you.
So you can say, as much as you're working with them and guiding them, it's almost as much as they want to work with you as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, to be quite honest, I think my horse Flynn would just like to eat grass all day if he could get away with it. But at the end of the day, we've all got to do some work. We can't all just build and eat grass. But no, when we're working in the woods, you can really tell when we're in a tricky situation. There's nowhere to turn. He's waiting there to find out what you want him to do. He wants your brain to work it out, and he's waiting there. And you can tell and when you ask him to walk on in a tricky situation in the woods or back up onto a log or whatever it might be, and he does it without hesitation, you just know that you've got something special there, and you've got a special horse, and you've managed to win him over, and it's quite a nice feeling.
Yeah. Okay. So, what's the biggest project you reckon you've completed to date?
What, with horse logging?
Yeah.
Well, all the jobs so far I've been doing have been working subcontracting to Kate and to other people, and I'm generally part of a team. But without doubt, the biggest job we've done was one in South Wales, near Port Talbot, and that was back in when was that? Back in November, I think, last year. So yeah, and it was incredibly challenging. The timber was big, and the terrain was steep, and Flynn and I were still novices, really, but we managed to keep up with the other professional horses there. Excuse me. Yeah, we managed to keep up with them just about and shift this big timber, and he did it really well. I think that was a great achievement. It was 3 weeks of hard work, but we learned a hell of a lot, and I think Flynn really gained a lot of confidence from that period, and so did I.
Yeah. So when you say you did it in November, and you've mentioned that it's a seasonal kind of job, what are the seasons that you're usually working in?
Well, that particular job was a fell and extract, so we had 2 guys felling, and there was 3 of us on horses, or no, 2 of us on horses, 2 of us felling on that job. So the felling really needs to happen outside birds nesting season, and it's in that particular woodland. It was actually a dormice project, and it was a thinning operation, and removing some evergreen spruce, I think it was, and we were removing that and letting natural regeneration happen to the hazel and the ash that were in the woodland, and that was really to increase the dormice populations that were there. So we wanted to do that at a certain time, so it didn't disrupt, say, any birds nesting, and didn't disrupt the dormice in the spring either. So it was decided by the manager there that it was going to happen in the autumn, I think. So
yeah. So is that when you talk about protecting the dormouse population and also birds nesting, would you say that's a big part of horse logging, that or working with horses in general, along with also using them as opposed to machines, that it is quite a conservationist and an environmentally friendly alternative?
Absolutely, yeah. That was the reason we were there. We were it was a big commercial woodland, and they were harvesting literally up the road with a tree harvester, but they decided this was Natural Resource Wales, so this was in a public-owned woodland in Wales, and they decided that this woodland had been clear felled back about 30 years ago or 25 years ago, but from now on it was going to be they were wanting to selectively thin using us. So the damage done to the woodland floor and to the habitats that were already there, it was minimized. I mean, we can't negate all the all damage. We got to fell trees and extract them, but compared to running machinery through, it's a lot better.
Also, yeah, when you're doing these projects, what's like you mentioned that you're part of a team, is that more of like a modern take on it, or is that sort of quite traditional that you'd be working with a group of people?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think years ago, I think there would have been teams of people doing it. So I think local the farm hands would have all joined forces, and there would have been multiple people involved. Nowadays, horse loggers sometimes like to work by themselves or with one other person. It's just Kate, who I was working for, Kate Morgan from Rowan Working Horses. She likes to work in a big team. In fact, she's probably the only person in the UK who works in that way. So she'll often take on a huge contract within horse logging terms, huge, 200-300 tons of timber, say, for example, and she'll bring in a couple of guys on saws for felling. She'll bring in, say, 3 or 4 horse loggers, of which I was one of them on that job, and she even brought in a chap with a tractor and a forwarder. So we were tushing timber to the track side, and then the tractor was taking it onto the stack, because there were forestry roads already in the woodland. So we were utilising the horse, which was good for tushing the timber out off the side of the hill to the roadway, and then utilising modern machinery from that point onwards. So the efficiency for the contract.
So do you feel connected to the like traditions and heritage of the craft?
I do, yeah. I do. It is important to remember that it is 2021, and that the only way working horses and horse logging is going to thrive is if we try to compete, try to create our niche and within the modern forestry sector, which is why I just saying that we in that last job we worked alongside a tractor forwarder, because tractor forwarders can shift a lot more timber along a road than the horse could. We could have used horses to forward that timber, but it would have been taken 3 times as long, and there's a cost attached to that. But where the horse comes into its own, extracting timber off the hillside, that can't be replaced by machinery, and that's where our niche is. So for us to sort of maintain these traditional crafts, as you said, and help to create a use for these heavy breeds as well into the future, it needs to be commercially sustainable. We can't just be there for the fun of it. We need to be earning a living, and we need to be commercially viable for the customers too.
Yeah. Okay, so what goes through your mind when you're practicing the craft? Like, are there any questions or judgments you think about when you're completing a part of the craft?
Yeah, I mean, it is the first thing that goes through your mind when you're actually carrying out horse logging is safety. It can be a dangerous game, really, for you and for your horse. So you're constantly looking to the safety of yourself and the horse at all times. Can be quite stressful. It's completely absorbing. You're constantly thinking ahead, and as you're moving the log around, you're constantly sort of working out the angle of the log and how to get it around a corner, for example, or bring it up to a stack site and stopping in the correct place and that sort of thing. it's completely absorbing. And before you know it, it's lunchtime and tea break, and it just flies by so fast. It's incredible.
Yeah. So when you're practicing, who are your like most common clients?
Well, so far it's been public bodies like Natural Resource Wales, Woodland Trust. I've been involved with a few projects, a few jobs for them. This has been subcontracting through other horse loggers, and then quite often, private estates. So I was just recently helped on a thinning job in Gloucestershire on a shooting estate near Cirencester.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I think we mentioned before the British Horse Logger Association, but are there like many big communities or organised groups who practice the craft, or is that just the main one at the moment?
I believe that is the only one in the UK. I may be wrong, but I'm not aware of any other national organisations which champion horse logging. Such there are many organisations out there for heavy horses and for certain breeds of horse, or certain geographical locations have their own heavy horse society. They meet up and mainly for showing purposes or demonstration work, that kind of thing.
So that, yeah, I guess that kind of mixes in with my next question, which is, have you taken part in any local events such as county fairs?
I haven't yet, no. As I said, we've had Flynn for almost 3 years now, so I haven't actually taken part in any shows. I wouldn't in the future if the opportunity came along, but yeah, it would be nice to do. I think Flynn's ready to do it. You can't just take a green horse to a show. It's very fun, children running around, flags and noise and loudspeakers and tannoy systems, etc. So it takes a little bit of thinking about before you take a horse to a show. And you need to be quite confident that you can manage a horse in those situations. So.
Is that one of my later on questions is, what do you think could be done to involve more people, which I think kind of relates to county fairs and showing off your horses?
How could you say that again?
How do you think you could involve more people?
Involve more people in horse logging?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, advertising at shows is fantastic. There's one particular show that the British horse loggers get involved every year is at the Stock Gaillards Oak Fair, which happens. It happens at the end of August, usually the August bank holiday weekend, and the British horse loggers have actually demonstrate horse logging there, and I think that's a great way to show how horses can be used in woodlands. It usually draws a big crowd, and they even make a bit of a competition out of it. And the horse loggers tend to compete and who can be the most accurate with position the log or getting through various obstacles and that sort of thing. And quite a lot of people like to come and watch it. So yeah, shows are important. I think in terms of getting more people to know about horse logging in the farming or forestry world, I think that's key too. I know the British horse loggers always attend the 2 national forestry shows, the Confor show, which is usually held at Longleat every 2 years, and also the APL show, which is held at usually Radley Hall up near Evesham. So they always having a presence there, and again carry out logging demonstrations using horses. I think people just need to see a horse and see what they can actually do. You often see stuff on TV. Countryfile seems to be quite a champion of horse logging. It seems to be on there fairly regularly, which is really nice to see. But really what we want to do is more landowners to start using horse loggers, or at least giving them a try to see, so they can demonstrate, how much to lift for them in a week or a fortnight or whatever. As opposed to just always picking up the phone of the local tractor driver or machinery operator. I think it'd be nice if more landowners gave horse loggers a try, and I think they'd be quite surprised how much timber they can shift and what quality we can do.
Yeah, so like mentioning the horse logging like appears on television, like Countryfile. How do you think the perceived value of the craft has changed over time?
Yeah, so the perceived value, yeah, I mean, basically, horse logging is a niche now, really. That niche tends to be, like we discussed earlier, special sites, triple size, for example, or sites which are too steep for machinery to use. So we do tend to get those types of sites. Prime sites still tends to go to the big machinery operators because we can't compete on price. So we do tend to get the more tricky stuff. So yeah, that's where we seem to be found at the moment. There are people out there who are wanting to champion horse logging and are prepared to push it forward, and to use horse loggers, and yeah, we could do with more clients, willing to give us a try, really.
Yeah. So like talking about like the perception of the craft, what are there, or if there are there any common misconceptions about your craft? Because I know like sometimes working animals can be a bit of a like argued subject.
Yeah. Do you mean from an rights type of perspective, or
Just kind of like just the general idea, like just like the general idea of working with animals. Like, does anyone are there any kind of misconceptions or like?
Like I said, in forestry, I think the biggest misconception is the efficiency of the working horse. I hope I've tried to dispel some of those myths, because with modern equipment, log archers, for example, and by working alongside modern machinery, we can shift quite a bit of timber in a day. A lot of it, the speed of the operation, a lot of it is dependent on how well the timber's been felled in the first place. How the timber's been presented is the term we use. A lot of it's the skill of the guy or the person who's doing the felling, and that's why quite often we like to take control of the felling ourselves. So we fell the timber in a way which works for the horse, and means we can extract that quickly and safely. But yeah, generally speaking, most people understand that working horses are that they're working horses, and they've been over hundreds of years to do that job. Yeah, I think forestry, horse logging, is one of the few traditional horse-related industries that there's still opportunity to earn money and to be professional at it. I think that's massively important for not only for the skills, the skills needed to work horses in the woods, to be passed on to other people, but also to keep the breeds going. If they haven't got work to go to, if there's no economic just thinking of the word now, if there's no market for them, really, they're not going to be bred. And shires, for example, are they are endangered. There are relatively few of them around, but they're by no means are they in the worst the worst on the ranking. I mean, suffer punches are really quite critical now.
Yeah, so that actually leads on to my next question. What is the most surprising development that has changed the way you practice your craft, like i.e. Horse breeds slipping into endangerment?
Yeah, I mean that's a major concern, really. Unfortunately, in this country, we are reliant on people like myself and enthusiasts who who are willing to own and work heavy horses. there is a market for them to be ridden and do ride heavies, but it's not that common. Their numbers have plummeted hugely since the 40s and the 50s, since the onset of the tractor. The numbers have just dropped like a stone. And being native breeds, their genetic pool is shrunk right down too. It's good with some breeds. It's got the number of breeding mares has got so low now that the interbreeding is really causing issues. And luckily that hasn't happened with the Shire, but with other breeds, I believe it is becoming a bit of a problem. And that's just down to the lack of numbers. And it's got to a stage where people are now importing horses from France, for example, using French breeds. They do tend to produce, they just do tend to have breeds in Europe, which are good for horse logging. Horse logging is very big in Europe. And so the Ardennes, which is a breed of horse, is often used. And there's another French breed called the Comtois, which is another one that's used, and people are now importing those into the UK and using those in forestry and in working horses instead of using native breeds. And that's a shame, and that's a situation really that shouldn't have been allowed to have happened in the past. And it's important that those breeds that they're not lost.
Yeah. So how long do you see yourself practicing the craft? Like, is it going to be something you can see yourself doing for the your rest of your working life, or is it more short term than that?
Well, I'd like to keep going as long as I can. It's like I said, it's a hard job. Perhaps when I'm 60, my back might not be able to take it anymore. I don't know. But I'd like to keep it going now. I've got plans to get more, get another horse, and increase the kit that I own, so I can offer more services to customers. But a lot of that will depend on how well the business takes off, how well the business does really. But I think I'd like to keep owning heavies for as long as I can.
Yeah. So I think we touched on it earlier, but what do you think could be done to involve more people, whether it be from getting people on board into the actual work, or just people becoming more aware in general?
Yeah, look, I mean, basically, first of all, there just needs to be we need to be used a lot more in the commercial sector. If we could do that, that means more apprentices could be taken on. If there was more work, a great apprenticeship schemes could be set up, perhaps using the British Horse Loggers Association. But the work needs to be there. And after all, when somebody finishes their apprenticeship, they probably want to set up by themselves or go and work for somebody, and then work there. So for the first thing that needs to happen, we need more work. But that all goes hand in hand with awareness of the whole debate over woodland management and woodland creation, which is really in the public eye at the moment. Woodlands are becoming more highly regarded than perhaps they were in the past, and their importance has become more known to people, perhaps especially during the last couple of years. But woodland management is still something that people don't understand, and woodland management is critical to keeping woodlands healthy. And I would like to see a lot of that woodland management done, obviously, but that could happen if more landowners chose horse loggers. Then more young people could come into the industry, and that would be great for horse logging, for the horse breeds as well, and it would mean that all those skills could be passed on without being lost.
Yeah. So building off that, do you think there are any barriers to getting involved with the craft? Is there anything that might stop someone from trying to pursue it?
Yeah, I mean the obvious ones. Horse ownership's not a cheap thing. be a number of years before I've been in a position to be able to do it. I'm in my 40s now. You know, when I was back in my 20s, there's no way I could have afforded to have my horse. But owning a horse is not, it doesn't necessarily stop you from getting into horse logging. You know, there are lots of ways you can volunteer for different organisations and for different individuals. Like I said, if more apprenticeships could come along, if more horse loggers could take on apprentices rather, then that would be a great way for young people to get involved. But as I said, that's all linked with the amount of work out there and the economic. But yeah, but for a young person going into horse logging or wanting to give it a try, volunteering with a local horse logger or organisation, or just getting in touch with the British Horse Loggers Association would be a really good start. Horse logging is not the only way you can get into working with horses. Obviously, there are people out there who take them to shows. So showing is another popular thing to do with horses. And obviously, working with riding horses too is a big business as well. So it's not just working horses, but those skills are all interlinked to a degree.
Yeah. So your website mentions public interaction is positive and engagement with local communities can be encouraged. Like, how does this usually look? Like positive public interaction with your work?
Yeah. Sort of carrying on from what I said just now about sort of people don't understand what woodland management is. People can be quite resistant to the sound of a chainsaw operating in a woodland. They don't quite understand what's going on. It's felling the Brazilian rainforest type of thinking. But when they see a horse working in a woodland, and that it just changes people's perceptions almost instantly. It's quite incredible. If you're out there with a chainsaw and people are questioning what you're doing, then you explain to them, well, we're horse loggers. We're actually thinning this woodland, and the horse will be extracting the wood. And they tend to want to engage a lot more, and they understand what you're doing, and that what you're doing, you're not just in there to fell out a bit of firewood and make a bit of money. You're there you're trying to do the best you can for that woodland. And even if they don't quite understand, the methods of woodland management, when they see you using the horse, it tends to work really well with local people. A lot of woodlands we work in, there's obviously public rights of way, bridle way, paths, etc. And some of them do tend to be community woodlands as well. And the communities have asked us to come in to manage their own woodlands. We had one in Gloucestershire back in September last year. Herefordshire. It was a millennium wood, and the local village had planted up these trees in year 2000 or whatever, and it was their first thinnings, and we carried that out using the horses, and they were thrilled with the work we did. So it can be very positive using horses, and with local engagement with people.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting. Would you say that like sometimes you do have like negative interactions just because you are a man with a chainsaw in the woods?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lack of. Usually, when you chat with people and you explain to them, what you're doing and the reason you're there, and perhaps the reason why the footpath's been closed and why there's a banksman there to stop them from walking through with their dog or whatever, they understand them. But yeah, there's generally a real lack of knowledge out there about how. Why do you need to fell trees? Why do you need to thin woodlands? People don't understand that. They don't question a farmer, farming practices so much, but in woodlands, it does seem quite alien to a lot of people. But no doubt that if you interact with people, and if they see that when they see the horses too, it does seem to make a difference. Yeah, definitely.
Did you say like using a rural craft such as like working horses can help to ease people into being educated about like more modern problems such as like proper woodland management?
Yeah, I think so. Um, I mean, so many people have been walked through the woods and they've seen a woodland closed and huge ruts left by big machinery, and they quite rightly question what's that all about, and and is that the right way to be managing in Britain's woods, and although in certain situations that perhaps is, it doesn't give a good press to the industry at all, really. And you know there are relatively few people working in the industry, so not many people even know somebody who works in woodlands. They might know their local tree surgeon, and that's about it. And so there isn't that knowledge or discussion really about woodland management out there. So yeah, we quite often have conversations on site with local people out there that they're usually very just interested in what we're doing, asking us lots of questions, and it's usually all very positive.
Yeah, so obviously like we talked about the things you've learned, the more sort of like physical knowledge side of it. But what do you think are the most important things you've learned through practicing the craft, like in regards to like hard work and authenticity and like that vein?
Yeah, I mean, horse logging is hard work. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Um, it's not for the faint-hearted. I, I I've been working as a landscape gardener my whole life. That's not an easy job either. So I kind of knew what hard work was before I got into horse logging. But there's no doubt about it. It's a tough job. It's a long day, and it doesn't stop when you get home, because you've got to feed the horse and look after the horse, and on your weekends you've got to do the same thing as well. It's a real lifestyle choice. It's a real commitment to own horses and work them. It's probably bad enough owning horses that you just ride at the weekend or whatever, but if when you work them as well during the week, and your every thought is about their welfare and about their care and things, it's all consuming, really. It's a hard work and relatively low paid, unfortunately, but you kind of do it for the thrill of it, for the love of it, really.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point actually. Would you say a working horse such as Flynn has a better quality of life than a horse that is solely ridden?
Um, obviously, um, obviously, not all horses can. So some horses are bred to be ridden, and as long as they are ridden and worked as a ridden riding horse, that's good. It's a bit like all of us, really. If we just veg out and don't do a lot, we're probably not going to last as long as perhaps we would do if we went for a jog 3 times a week or whatever. To have a horse and keep that horse fit and in work, it's not only good for their physical well-being, it's also good for them for mental stimulus too. My horse Flynn, for example, I went for a ride on him yesterday, and we went for a 6-mile hack up the road. Next week I could be out on a 3-day contract horse logging with him, and he gets a huge amount of variety. And sometimes we do other things with him, like taking I do schooling with him, ridden schooling work, and so he does his gym workout session once or twice a week, and then he might have a hack on a weekend, and then have a few days in the woods pulling timber too. So he has a good life, I think.
Yeah.
A lot a better life than perhaps some other horses do.
Mm. Yeah, I think that brings me to the end of my questions. Actually, I'm just seeing if we have any spare. Sorry, I missed this one. So how much competition do you face from commercial businesses? More so like you personally, like, do you think you have a unique selling point that gives you an advantage over commercial businesses?
Do you mean like other horse loggers, or the alternative to horse logging?
I guess alternative to horse logging.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying just now, horse logging has tended to find to sort of market itself into a niche market within forestry, albeit quite a small niche, but working on steep wet sites, and on protected sites too, and for environmental projects as well. When it comes to competing with commercial operations, there's no doubt about it. We would be a lot more expensive. We would be more expensive than a commercial operation. But of course, the damage done to the site would be a lot less. So if you're going to cost in that damage, we probably would be on par with with the commercial guys with their big machinery. But not everybody chooses that path, and they'll choose the cheaper, more cost-effective option. So there is an issue there. There's no doubt about it. But horse logging, it does have a small foothold in some sectors in forestry. We just need to keep plugging away and keep pushing for that. And I think the more people who come into the industry in the future can only be a good thing. I think the more people there are, the more market. I think the more markets can be opened up. Really,
Yeah,
good for everybody.
Yeah. So do you think that will stop the craft from becoming like lost over time? Is that like solid niche that you've had for so long?
I would hope so. Yeah. As I said, I'm new to the industry. I'm just coming in now, just finding my feet. But talking to others who are more established, they've had a struggle, to be quite honest with you, to get recognised, to get going, to get trusted by local bodies. But once it's the same with all businesses, isn't it? Once you get known, that word of mouth gets out, and you do a good job for somebody, and that word gets out, and you suddenly find yourself with more work. But there's just no doubt about it. We do need more. The industry does need a bit of a shot in the arm. It does need a lot more people, a lot more public bodies, perhaps woodland trusts, perhaps, and individual estates to just start using horse loggers. It's only for a portion of their work. It would be a great way to get more people involved in the sector, really.
Do you think that kind of like threat over time resulted in the horse logging society, if you want to call it that, like becoming a lot more like willing to help each other through like mentorships and such?
Yeah, the horse logging community is very close. Everybody knows each other. I'm quite new to it, so I'm learning the names, but I've got to know people in the Southwest and South Wales to a degree. There are relatively few people doing it, so you don't need to don't know that many people, but we will tend to travel quite long distances for our jobs, which probably shows that there are very few jobs out there, opportunities out there, really. Yeah, there are. It is a very close knit community, and we do all help out. Help each other out, whether it's with help with training young horses, or perhaps buying and selling equipment, or just giving advice. Really, we're always on WhatsApp to each other, keeping in touch, or on Facebook or Instagram or something. So you keep in touch with what everyone's doing.
Yeah, I think that that builds on to another question. Is like, how do you actively promote your craft? Like you just mentioned, then you use social media, or is it also like a reliance on word of mouth?
Yeah, I think all of that, really. I think social media is great. I'm not particularly good at social media, but there are other horse loggers out there who are excellent at it. There's one particular horse logger in South, down in the Purbeck, Toby Hode, from Dorset Horse Logging. He's very good on Instagram, and he'll put 2 or 3 or 4 posts up a week or something, various contracts or jobs he's doing. showcasing his lovely comptoirs. So yeah, he's very good at it, and I think that's a good way of promoting yourself. But at the end of the day, you just got to get known by the key decision makers on estates or with Woodland Trust or Forestry Commission or whoever it might be. And if you can network in those circles and get yourself known, and people are receptive to horse logging in those offices, then you've got half a chance of winning a job, I think. But yeah.
Yes, I think that brings us to the end. Is there anything you think we've missed, or anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I think that's pretty comprehensive. I think we've talked about forestry management, horse breeds, and the skills too. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I think like we've covered a lot, and I've certainly learned a lot. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I've enjoyed talking about it.
Yeah.